Up. Sure.
I just unmuted.
There we go. All right, it is 10 o'clock. We'll call the meeting to order. I'd like to welcome everybody here in person and online. Thank you everybody for coming in. And we'll just get right on into it. So, roll call, please.
Amber, are you able to do that? Yeah.
Yes. Lee,
Here.
Mike,
Here.
Stephanie,
Here.
Randy,
Here.
Teresa, Mike, Marlo,
Mike Marlowe here.
Ed, Rondalyn,
Here.
Cole,
Here.
and then it looks like we have Commissioner Lerner there as well as our commission liaison.
All right. Item 3, discuss possible action to excuse any committee member absences. Do we have any pending issues that cause, or known issues that would have caused any excused absence?
We haven't heard from anyone.
Okay. Number 4, housekeeping, Miss Abby.
So I know you're very familiar with this at this point, but before I do housekeeping, I did want to just take a moment and introduce our newest attorney, our Assistant General Counsel, Brittany Ramirez. She joined us in March. She comes to us from the AG's office. She's got a lot of really great background. We're so excited to have her, and you'll see her around at these meetings.
Welcome.
Okay, so we'll get started here. So as you know, the microphone for the room is at the center here. It is sensitive, so it does pick up side conversations, just to be aware of that. For those of you on the call, we've got our committee members with their cameras on and muted. That's great. If you need to say anything during the meeting, feel free to speak up, raise your hand, unmute, and we can call on you. And then for those of you that are not committee members, we ask that you just stay off camera muted during the meeting. And I think that's it.
All right. Moving on. Item number 5, ratification of the minutes of the January 27, 2025 meeting. Those had been posted online, so we'll ask if there are any modifications that anybody wants to make to those minutes. Hearing none, those will stand ratified. Item number 6, general comments from visitors or written comments on the non-agenda items. Are there any comments from visitors on the non-agenda item to be heard? I don't recall seeing any big ones.
I haven't gotten anything.
Yeah. Something must be wrong. Something must be wrong. All right, reports from subcommittees. Education.
We met last month, nothing too dramatic. We went over the proctoring stuff and how they prove the particular person is the one attending or doing the testing. Pretty much what we've already seen.
Okay.
And we looked at the results from the national exam and stuff. Really, it was fairly non-dramatic meeting, nothing too dramatic there. We didn't, because I don't know when you sent your email, but we will at the next meeting discuss the practicum and making sure, discussing if we want to have inspectors finish the coursework before they actually do the practicum. So that's something that we'll discuss on in the next subcommittee meeting. That's basically it.
Any what are your thoughts on the national stuff? I know on the state side of the inspector exam, we got a pretty good handle on it. I mean, once a year we go through all those questions, and I think we keep that narrowed down pretty well. But the national part is always the one that everybody's like gets kind of bonkers.
There's so much stuff on it that doesn't apply.
Spoilers and heating oils, and
but I don't know what can be done about it.
We build our own exam, but that's a whole different ball of wax.
yeah.
Well, they do go out, the EBPHI does a job task analysis every 5 years. And what we talked about was the result of that job task analysis. And so there were some changes to the national exam content outline kind of the same types of things that are done every 5 years. And I believe some of the changes were like, they added electrical vehicle charging stations to the content outline, a few different things, and then a few things were reordered or moved into a different topic. So they weren't really substantive. And I think the committee recommended no changes to our course content outlines, just making the providers aware and letting them know where the revised content outline was.
And I do think from a student's perspective, it makes it a lot easier. Now they have the opportunity to take those separately. I think that makes a big difference, because when they get all intermingled in the same test.
Right.
Yeah. You start talking SOPs and then eating well. It's just, your brain goes from one place to another. And the practicum thing that he's referring to is something that's being referred to the education subcommittee. But the thought process of one complaint that I got was that you're getting educators that are saying, or inspectors are saying, people are asking to do the practicum, but they haven't gone through any of the coursework yet. Well, the whole point of the practicum is to apply the coursework to what you have learned to be able to do the practicum. And there's no timeline currently in the way things are set up. So in theory, they could do the practicum right off the bat before they do the coursework, which is counterproductive.
Totally defeats the purpose.
So that's one of the things that their education subcommittee is.
Probably not favorable for the inspector who's conducting.
No, and and that's a big part of the problem is whoever is instructing that student. It's like they have no basis of knowledge, and they're actually having to provide all the education for them. So, all right.
The question, the NHIE, how has that been selected as the exam? Is that something in the law, in the TREIC rules? Where is that dictated, for lack of a better word?
Jennifer?
That's a good question. I was just going to pull up the statute and see if that's.
And just because there are other exams out
Believe it.
there.
Yeah.
I was just going to add to the discussion on from an air conditioning perspective. Fuel oils, boilers, all that stuff is on the licensing for Texas. Rarely did we run across those, but I had no problem with that stuff being on there, because after being in air conditioning for 6 or 8 years running my own company, I actually did start running across boilers and steam, and having had to pass the boiler section, and the boiler code played a good part there. Also, if they ever decide to move from state to state, and you're talking about reciprocal licenses,
Okay.
I've seen one residential oil-fired furnace
I haven't seen
since
one.
I've moved down here.
Yeah, I haven't seen one yet.
Yeah. So
You look like you had something there, Jennifer.
I was just gonna say, it looks like it's in rule. So it's not dictated in statute, but it's laid out.
In the room.
a little easier to adjust.
Lee.
Am I allowed to make a
Yeah,
comment?
stand up.
So I went through license.
Wait. Stand up. Say your name.
Sorry.
I warned you.
So my name is Brian Grohl. I'm a licensed inspector. I went through licensing during COVID, and I had the firsthand experience of a reduced ride-along. And I think my recommendation to the education subcommittee and the committee in general will be coursework must be complete before you do the practicum. My experience was we did a virtual ride-along, which was a show and tell all over Zoom. And obviously I became a successful inspector, but it made it really rough. And I think we owe it to our licensees and to the profession to make sure that people who hold the license are able to do a thorough quality job and apply the standards. And doing the practicum before you've completed your coursework doesn't afford you the opportunity to really apply what you've learned, because you haven't learned anything.
Kind of like a doctor going through residency before they've done med school.
Yeah,
right.
You gotta learn the stuff before you can apply it.
So I think looking at the timeline is a good thing for the subcommittee to head up. And during COVID, that was a real tricky one. We are allowing the virtual practicum for law enforcement. We have gotten rid of that as that was just a temporary item. So it does all back in person. So that's good. All right. Onward and upward. Standard to practice subcommittee.
Yes, our last meeting, we went over the electrical section, and what came out of that summary is just to go ahead and bring up all of the standards of practice on electrical up to the 2023 NEC. We did have good input from a public guest about water heater disconnects, what constitutes a proper disconnect and not. And then our next meeting is going to go over the section on mechanical.
Any questions for Mr. Randy? All right, so we will move forward to staff reports, executive division, including legislative updates.
Good morning, I'm Chelsea Buckwitz, Executive Director. I'm going to pass it to Summer in just a second for a legislative update. I think that's where most of our updates are, just given that it is the 21st of April. So we've got about a month and 10 days before the legislature concludes their time. So basically they're starting their work about now. I'm kidding somewhat, but it's slow work in January, February, March, and then once April hits, it gets busier. Yeah, things happen quickly. But on a more general update, we have our May commission meeting in San Antonio. That's on the 5th. We did not plan to have Cinco de Mayo in San Antonio.
Yeah.
Right? So you are welcome to join us there if you would like. We're also in our last months of implementing our licensing database, which is really our back-end system that affects every department and everything we do. It's how we receive payment. It's how we process licenses. It's how we process enforcement. And so any tired eyes you see in the room are probably because we're doing our normal jobs and then also working on that system, which is a heavy lift, but I think it's going to be really great. For inspectors especially, it will mean much more capability online. All of our applications will be online. They will not be in paper form anymore. We will not accept checks any longer. All payments will be online. I know that I got a, of course, that's normal. And then the next person is like, I'm sorry, what? You won't let me send in a check? I was working on faxing something this morning. I understand the dilemma. But we will have a period of going kind of dark where we will not process, but at the end of August, we will warn all those who have renewals within that timeline to just renew early. We're basically notifying, we notify at 90 days, 60 days, 30 days, and we're doing that 30 days ahead so that everybody is warned. But this is going to be a really good thing. There will be a transition process. And then we have appointments for commissioners looming. That doesn't affect you on the day-to-day, but it means that 3 of our 9 commissioners will transition in the next month, 2, 3, something like that.
So 2 brokers, 1 public?
Correct. And our public member, Jason Hartgraves, has already been appointed to a new board. So that he has not been confirmed, so he will be at the May commission meeting, but that transition has already begun. We do not know about the other 2, both broker members, including our chair. So those are kind of the big picture moving parts that are happening. I'm happy to answer any questions y'all have on those things or anything else. And if no questions, we'll pass it to Summer for all of the real work.
Hi, everyone. I'm Summer Mandel, the Government Strategic Communications Director. So I do comms and I do GR stuff. So for this body, I just want to give you a quick update on the bill that initiated from this committee. It's HB 3593. Yes, that's right. So if you go to capitol.texas.gov, you can enter in that bill number and see all sorts of information about it. It was filed and referred to the Licensing and Administrative Procedures Committee on March 25th. It hasn't been calendared yet, which means it hasn't been set for a hearing. Once it's set for a hearing, though, that's good news. And it means, they'll lay it out in the committee and hear testimony, and hopefully it keeps moving along. As a reminder, this bill is for 4 hours of pre-licensing education for apprentice inspectors. And that's really where we stand now, just watching, waiting, hoping that it gets calendared. But it was assigned to committee just last month, so I'm not really surprised that it happened, because there were things that were filed last year in
Yeah.
November. So, and then do you guys have any questions about that or anything else going on with session?
If you can kind of keep the committee up to date on if that gets calendared or any steps that get taken, so that if we need to give input or maybe come down or go to any of those meetings, I'm more than happy to.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm watching every day to see what's happening. So I'm on top of it. Cool. Well, it's good to see y'all.
Thank you. All right, TREIC enforcement.
And before Mike does that, I'm just going to jump in and just have a little brief update for you about some rules. So one of the things, just to give you kind of a heads up, FYI, one of the things that we're doing in light of what Chelsea mentioned, the license management project, is we are now sort of going through our rules and making sure that our new process under this new project aligns with what our rules say. So one of the things we're doing across the board, we looked at every chapter. So some of these changes will necessarily impact inspector rules as well, is make it sort of a non-substantive change to the language to allow for this online process. So our rules were kind of all over the board, not just inspector rules, but really all our rules where it required some action by a license holder or an applicant, for instance, to submit a document. And it used all sorts of different kinds of language. It would say use an online process, use a form approved by the commission, use a process acceptable to the commission. So what we're doing is we're trying to unify all of that and use one process, one language, or one kind of set of terminology so that it's not kind of all over the board. So you'll see a lot of rule changes in May for proposal that have kind of changes to the language in line with that. We're moving to the phrase process acceptable to the commission to kind of capture all of the different things that can happen with this new license management project. So just wanted to give you a heads up that you may see some inspector rules in the mix on that, but that's the change.
All right, enforcement.
Yes, good morning. Tony Renteria, staff attorney and liaison to the inspector committee. Since last meeting, we have 3 cases. All the committee members should be getting a copy of the orders whenever they come out. If you're not getting it, let me know. Sometimes when we change committee members, we have to add you to the link where we send out the email. But you should be getting it. Again, there's 3 cases, and if you have any questions about any of those cases, we'd be happy to answer any questions.
Good.
Shannon Gatewood. I do have a question on 250436. And I understand that what we see on the disciplinary actions and everything is a kind of a synopsis, but it talked about the water supply lines where he looked at the water meter for 15 seconds and didn't see it moving. And it talks about that if you're going to do above and beyond, then you need to be competent, right? I mean, everybody knows that. What is the requirement for time-wise? Because I mean, it's specifically said he looked at it for 15 seconds and it didn't move. And the buyer complained that they've got a 10-gallon per minute leak or whatever. I can't remember the exact specifics, but I wasn't quite sure on what the basis of the disciplinary action for not seeing the defect on the water meter after 15 seconds. So I'm just trying to get some clarification on that. Basically, if there's an enforcement action, there has to be something objective to go off of, right?
I kind of looked at it as if you look at it for 15 seconds, it's 10 gallons per minute. That thing's moving.
10 gallons a minute.
That thing better be. That thing is spinning.
Yeah, like the water faucet out there wide open.
You know,
And it was the 15 seconds that got me.
Because I think that's what he specified in his report is that he looked at it for 15 seconds. And it's like, well, if you actually looked at it for 15 seconds and it's 10 gallons per minute, you didn't look at it for 15 seconds. You looked at the wrong thing because that thing would have been spinning like
per
a top.
hour.
Yeah.
Either that or the leak wasn't there when he did the inspection.
You what?
Either that or the leak wasn't there when he did the
And
inspection.
that's absolutely entirely
Yeah.
valid.
So,
Go ahead, Tony.
so anyways, just to answer your question, we did take a close look at this issue very, very closely. We did some research on it because you're right. there are no specific guidelines on to how to perform this test. The thing is, and Kerry is the attorney that handled that case, and he'll be able to explain it in more detail. He did look at it carefully, but the issue is he doesn't have to do it. But if you do it, you got to do it competently.
Right.
And, you know, some of the evidence that we looked at, there were actually, the pictures that he took weren't 15 seconds apart. They were 3 seconds apart.
Gotcha.
And, you know, and I'll have Kerry kind of explain what he did, why we came up with the resolution, but we don't just, you know, we do take a look at it to see what would be competent. We're not going to define a specific time frame, you know, because that's not what we do. But we do come to a determination that what he did was not sufficiently competent.
I think the background on this was, it was a rainy day when he did the inspection, so the leak was between the meter and the house. So if there's a 10 gallon an hour leak, you're gonna see it in the yard somewhere. But for it was ready that day. So, but he undertook this test, looked at it 15 seconds apart, which 10 gallons, that's what the complainant said. Even if it was a gallon an hour, that's gonna manifest somewhere. And 15 seconds apart isn't gonna be enough for that little dial to move. Even enough to indicate that there's a leak.
And the dial, there's 2 kinds of dial.
There's the odometer that turns over, then the dial. A lot of meters have the low flow indicator.
Right.
This meter did not. This was an old meter. So the dial wasn't able to move enough to see that there was.
So I like the digital one.
Yeah. It was, like I said, the 15 seconds is what caught my attention on, but that was him saying.
That was him saying 15 seconds.
Okay, maybe
And then had the picture of 3. And I know that a lot of inspectors are going to look at that meter. I know I do.
Right.
You know what? I'll sit and I'll watch it for a little bit, or I'll open it up and then get stuff out of my car and then go back and look in and see if it's actually good. But I don't put it in there that I looked at it for X amount of seconds.
Right, and that's what I wanted the clarification on, like, where are we going with that? I just wanted to make sure, okay, so I'm good.
My name is Brian Rule. So I think, you know, I'm concerned that I'm hearing we're holding somebody responsible for not spotting a leak that would have shown up on almost all meters. You know, gas meters, water meters all have tattletale dials, and the lowest dial on an odometer style meter is a gallon. It's going to show some kind of movement, even over 15 seconds, and it's a latent defect if it's buried in the yard. You know, there's been a tendency for, and I can't speak for other inspectors, my report has all sorts of disclaimers to defend against this. That, you know, like when I looked at one of the other enforcement actions is on ducts in the attic, and I've started adding a comment to my report to make it abundantly clear to my client, I'm not going to traipse through the insulation in the far corners of your attic. I'm going to go to the places that are reasonably accessible. And I think we either need to be explicit in the standards of practice that say the inspector shall observe the meter for this amount of time, or we need to be conservative in holding people responsible for latent defects that they didn't see. You described a situation where it's raining. How much? Who cares? The ground is wet. A reasonably, 10 gallons a minute. That's a big hour.
10 gallons.
Oh, 10 gallons an hour. Thanks.
So that's not a big leak.
10 gallons an hour is still a reasonably observable leak. But if it's raining like it was in Houston this morning when I was leaving, you're not going to notice 10 gallons anywhere because it's raining 10 gallons a minute. So I just, I think we need to either be explicit in the SOPs and not leave things vague, or we need to be conservative in enforcing latent defects that are claimed later on by the buyer who is unhappy with what they bought.
I think for me, the issue here is not necessarily that. It's the fact that he specifically stated that he looked at it for 15 seconds, and he's basically claiming going in above and beyond service. Now, if he hadn't said, I didn't look at, if he just went through the normal thing and didn't explicitly put in there, I looked at it for 15 seconds, he's basically telling a client there is no leak, by saying that. And once he does that, now I think that opens up. Anytime, and I've said this in anytime I've taught a class, the standards are a minimum standard. Anytime you go above those, you increase your liability, and there has to be competency in doing that. But if you're doing that by saying, I looked at it 15 seconds, that thing did not move 15 seconds, you're taking that on, that you're telling your client there is no leak. beyond that meter.
So did he state in his report that there was no leak in the house, or did he just state, I looked at the meter for 15 seconds and didn't observe any?
I think it's good.
In the report, he says water meter was checked for movement with all fixtures in and around the home turned off. And there was
Okay.
no leak.
And
He
he
said
said
there was no
there was no leak.
He put that in there.
That's the implication.
The information was.
So Lee's absolutely correct. The issue is not that he didn't catch a latent leak. That wasn't the issue. The issue is that the standards of practice do state that you don't have to, go above and beyond. But if you do, you have to do it competently. And that was the issue here, that he chose to do this leak test by observing the water meter. And doing it in the way that he did it wasn't competent.
And do we have a plumbing standard that says how long you should observe a meter?
No, it's just not in there.
We're not going to define
You
it.
don't have to check the meter. From like Texas Plumbing Board. Because competency is, I mean, to me, this is an open window to enforce when we want to enforce and not when we don't. And that's my objective.
I think without having it written, I'm just saying competent manager is a little objective, isn't it?
We don't have, and we don't set objective standards.
I'm sorry,
Yeah,
Cole,
so
was that?
so I said, just saying in a competent manner and not having a process written down for testing it is I guess somebody was about to lead into it. It's a little subjective. That's in your mind, it wasn't competent manner. I mean, shutting it off and observing no leak. And then you're talking about an implied, which was not actually stated. The implication was this is all very subjective, and whoever's looking at it for whatever outcome they want, right?
Yeah.
Well, that's the thing. The thing is that it's the inspector who chose to perform the test the way that he performed it.
I mean, it's the
Right,
inspections
but
that-
I'm saying the
visual-
analysis is subjective. You have no written thing to say it was competent or not competent. Who decided it was not competent?
Well, the fact that there was a leak and he didn't report it, I guess, is what made that decision.
That's what we look at.
Do we know it was there at the time of the inspection? I mean, so I don't know. I'm just raising the question that if it's not written down how to test it, it's highly subjective how to interpret it.
We do look, we don't have standards to tell you that you have to do this test a certain way, because we don't have to do this test. That's the thing. So we can't say that you have to do it. You got to wait a certain amount of time. But we do look at, we did do some research into what, for example, I'm going to cite the city of Boston recommends, if you go to their website, they recommend to homeowners that if you can go check your water meter for a leak. If you do, what they recommend is that you have to look at it, make a note of what the numbers are, and then you have to wait, I think it's 1 to 2 hours, Harry, and then you look at it again. So that's an objective from the city of Boston Water.
Yeah. So that's you charge a system with an inert gas and for air conditioning, and you have a set time that you're supposed to leave it and then go back and check. But that's the same thing in plumbing. They have the same requirement for new systems to pass inspections. So, all I was saying is that the interpretation is subjective, and it seems like there should be, well, if you don't have to do it, so you're not going to write a process on how to do it. Is that what I'm hearing from the inspector vantage?
I think the issue here is that it's a limited visual inspection, and that's the intent of what we're doing. And if you take out the component of this inspector saying that he shut everything down for 15 seconds, nothing was running 15 seconds, he watched the meter, looked at that, it's giving the implication that there is no leak, by going through that process. If he had not done that, and it was raining, so there was no way you could see the water staying or the excessive water in the front yard, that's a latent defect that he would not have been picked up, and this wouldn't have been an issue. But the fact that he went in and said all the fixtures were shut off, looked at it 15 seconds, the thing did not move, he's basically telling him there is no leak there. And granted, yes, it could have happened after the fact, and there is that, but I think that's the hook of kind of where this is.
Well, you said his pictures were taken 3 seconds apart versus 15, right?
That's the other
So
issue,
that's
yeah.
another,
Yeah.
if he would have taken that picture 15 seconds or later, then that would have been a better defense of him saying there
True.
was.
Yeah.
So, but he put himself on the hook by exceeding our minimum SOP.
And then not exceeding it.
in right.
Yeah, he put it in writing, but then really not exceeding it. Yeah.
Yeah, and I agree. The 3-second picture.
Stand up, say your name.
But
Stand up, say your name.
I'm sorry. So Brian Rule again. So I think 1 or 2 hour observation windows unreasonable in home inspection to shut off the fixtures and wait 2 hours. The standard for DWV plumbing in building code is 24 hours at 35 PSI. I don't know what the pressure side is because I rarely do code inspections on supply plumbing I don't, that's just not the thing I do. But I know on the DWV side, it's 35 PSI with like a very narrow, you're not allowed to lose more than like a half PSI or something. So again, I just caution that we either need to be explicit in the SOP or we need to be conservative. And I'm not convinced that missing a 10 gallon an hour leak should have been a $1,500 fine.
Yeah.
That's my opinion.
I don't think it would have been an issue if he wouldn't have wrote the comment the way he wrote the comment, though.
I think he increased his liability by putting it in the report in the manner in which he did.
And that's the message, really. And it is explicit in the SOP that if you go above and beyond, you have to do it competently.
So in other words, if you go above and beyond and you say you're going above and beyond, make sure you do what you say.
Yeah.
You better know what you're doing.
You gotta know what you're doing.
Well, you better know what you're doing and do what you said you were going to do. That's I think where I was trying to get with that. So.
Tony, anything else?
No, that's all I have. Thank you.
All right. Education and Examinations Division.
Jennifer Wheeler. The education reports are included in your materials, both the inspector and qualifying and CE course application submissions remain steady with 41 initial and renewal QE courses received this fiscal year and 106 ICE courses. Application processing times have significantly improved over the last month. Education providers submitting ICE courses can expect turnaround times under 10 days. The Acela transition project that Chelsea mentioned over the next couple of months is going to get pretty intense. Transitioning an entirely paper process in our education division to all online processes is a heavy lift, but the benefits we expect to achieve will totally be worth the work. Communications to prepare education providers for the change will be going out on a regular basis starting this week.
So this is like even class approvals, stuff like that. Everything will be done.
Everything, yeah.
No more checks.
No more checks.
No more reading people's chicken scratch.
Mailing in, course materials, any of that kind of thing. Yeah, it's gonna be really great. And then I know your chair Lee is going to talk about this in another agenda item, but I did also want to let you guys know that we've completed the 2025-2027 Inspector Legal and Ethics and SOP course manual. The subject matter experts who participated in the writing group are, again, your chair Lee, Stephanie, and Shannon. They did a stellar job of providing content and working under deadlines. So I just want to acknowledge them in this setting.
Do they get automatic credit for doing the course for the renewal cycle?
We've discussed that.
You need to make that.
Thanks for bringing that up.
They've been down that road.
I brought it up before and was shot down.
Tried that.
I think they have spent more than 8 hours.
Tried that 4 years ago and didn't work then either. Yeah.
I tried.
It was worth a shot. Yeah.
I will give you just a brief summary of some of the changes. It's not all brand new content. We reordered the first 3 chapters for a better flow. We replaced the matching exercise on departures with a scenario-based learning exercise. Hot Topics, Chapter 4 is all brand new content. We added a new chapter, Module 5, which is TREIC enforcement. We added new case studies throughout the manual. We did keep some that were particularly of, good learning exercises. And then added and deleted some of the content sections, such as structural systems. We added fresh content sections on foundations, roof inspections, crawl spaces, deleted retaining walls, exterior and interior glazing, and porches, balconies, decks, and carports. In plumbing, we added fresh content on cast iron pipes, appliances, fresh content and pictures of dryer exhaust systems, deleted bathroom exhaust fans, and optional systems, a deep dive on private sewage disposal. And then I also want to acknowledge our enforcement team. Tony is super helpful, providing enforcement cases and even just, background info. So that's all I'll say about that. That was sent to you under separate cover, and it's going to be before the commission in May. That concludes my report.
Any questions for Jennifer? All right, licensing.
Good morning. I'm Denise Sample, Director of Licensing, and in your materials, we've got some statistics on applications received through February. This represents the first half of the fiscal year. So you'll see on the bottom left of the page 12 of the materials, the year-to-date comparison of inspector applications received. It's broken out by license type. The next page has easement and right-of-way and the new business entity registration. So if we move on to page 14, on the right-hand side, you'll see the renewal rates. These are kind of what drive forecasting or budgeting and just, license holder counts. We cue in on the renewal rates. So you see those broken out by license type. And this is a comparison of fiscal year 2023 to the current fiscal year because all of these licenses are on a 2-year renewal cycle. The following page is license holder and registration counts. And so the inspectors are kind of at the bottom of that table there. You'll see we ended February with about 4,400 total licensed inspectors, and of those, about 3,600 were active. So the next page is a graphical presentation by license type. You'll see the yellow inspectors are in the yellow bar graph, and that's a 13-month comparison of inspector counts. And then the last page of my reports is application processing times. We've been noticing a slight uptick in some of the application processing times, and that's a result of the resources, the strain on the resources, I'll say, for implementing the new licensing project. So it's taken a good chunk of the team to perform testing and make sure that all of those applications and all the various steps are working. And so we're anticipating a slight uptick in how long it takes us to process because it's the same team of people that are doing both. But hopefully we can remain under that goal of 14 days. So monitoring that one as well. And that concludes my report.
Numbers slowly trickling down again.
It's funny. Yeah, I mean, as the market cools, once the market cools,
it's a cycle. I mean, it's been that way, it happens. So we did our highest point, a couple of years ago, and it's just slowly starting to trickle back down.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, interesting. All right.
Is there a point where we start to worry?
I don't think we're anywhere close to that. I think 2008 or something like that, we got down to like 23 or just under 2,400 actively licensed inspectors. I mean, total licenses, but the active ones were like less than 2,400. And then it just, the floodgates opened.
And that was when?
08.
2008.
08, yeah, 08.
That makes sense.
Yeah, the
Right around the
total
recession.
counts, while inspectors have fluctuated a little bit, but the total license holder count since 2008 has just been rising each year.
Yeah.
I will say I just renewed, and once they processed it, I got the email saying they could not send me my license because they didn't have my email.
But they emailed you the.
But the email can tell you that?
Yes. Yes. So
from the Department of Redundancy Department?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, I know the email used to log into the account is separate from what is officially, part of the license record. And we're hoping with the new system, we will be removing the ability for someone to backspace and just delete that field. Which
I have a feeling that's what happened in mine because I was getting all the notifications and everything. And then I got that and I went in and checked and my email address had disappeared. I was like, huh.
Is it all resolved now? Okay, good.
But it was the, like, you're emailing me
Right.
to tell me you don't have my email.
Little comment.
Brian Gruhl. So the distribution of the I also hold a CE provider license. So I spent a lot of time looking at the license data before it became heavily redacted. The licensee distribution on the inspector side roughly mirrors the population. You've got about a third of the inspectors in Houston, a third of them in DFW, and a third of them in San Antonio, Austin. And there's some small percentage that are spread out everywhere else. It's the same thing with the agent licenses. To your question about, where's our point? Do you guys track? So I had a question. Do you track the non-renewals and try to get any insight into how many of them, where they are in the inspector life cycle?
As far as how long they've been licensed?
Yeah, what I'm curious about is, do we have people who are retiring, or do we have people who are just leaving because of whatever?
We don't actually track that data. Currently, we capture the renewal rate, and this reflects timely renewals. So another enhancement that we'll have in the new system is the ability to distinguish between how many were timely and how many renewed late. And that might get us a better picture of kind of what the tendency is, but currently we don't track that kind of data.
I think the thing that I would query in the database is I would look at the tenure of the expiring license to get that data, because somebody who has 15 years of tenure is very likely retiring, and somebody who has 2 years of tenure, they're not renewing after their first or second license cycle, is basically washing out of the industry. I don't know that matters.
Say to what end?
We made changes to, it's a good question, Lee. So we made changes to the curriculum. It's been about 2 years now, where we cut the curriculum in half in an attempt to make it easier for people to get licensed.
That's not why we did that.
Okay.
In any way, shape, or form, that is an inaccurate statement. I understand the perception, but I want to be very clear on that, because I hear that every so often. We did not do it to make it easier for people to get a license. It's not. We did it through a governor's office directive that we needed to lower the roadblocks of getting into an industry. And our pre-licensure education requirement was 3 times more than any other state in the country.
Okay.
So we had to get closer to be in line to reduce those roadblocks. So
okay.
That's why we had to do that.
Thank you for clarifying that. But yeah. You having the data of what percentage of licensees are obtaining licensure and then washing out can provide insight into, what's the, there's a public interest in having inspectors. And you don't want to wait until you've dropped down to 2,300 inspectors or less to go, oh, hey, we have a problem that's affecting the well-being of our licensees. And I think looking at your licensee retention and renewal rates can help you read the tea leaves before you get to that, oh my gosh moment.
I think that with this industry, with inspections, I think it's a very unique industry. With what most of us do, it's usually a semi-retirement industry to get into. We get a lot of people that become inspectors that had a different job, a career job for a long time, and now they're in their semi-retirement kind of age. So the lifespan of an inspector doesn't tend to be as long as it is in many other industries. But I think supply and demand takes care of a lot of that. Like when we went down to 2,300, it was like those of us that were here at that time, we were swamped because there was just constant blowing and going. And then people started seeing that oh, there's a good opportunity to get into a business, and that started trickling back up. Same with agents and whatnot. I think supply and demand takes care of a lot of that. But I think the majority of people that get in this industry are usually on the older side. So the overall tenure and lifespan of an inspector tends to be shorter anyway. So
how do we attract a younger generation to this?
It's a good question. I don't know the answer to that. So, all right, with that, any other questions for licensing division? Oh, all right. Item number 9, discussion of possible action regarding requirements changes to 22 TAC. Ms. Abby.
It's me. So this is now the third time many of you have seen this.
Yeah.
Fourth time if you're on the education subcommittee. So just a little background. So back in November, ESAC recommended these changes to do two things. One, to remove the proctoring requirements from a set of education rules, and then, or from the education rules, and then also to clarify or expand the language, if you will, for verifying ID. It was pretty narrow, and so the committee felt like it could benefit from being expanded a little bit. And so because these also impacted inspector education, we brought it to you at that point in October for proposal in November. You all recommended it for proposal. It went to, along with ESAC, it went to the commission in November. They officially proposed it, and then it went out for public comment. And during that time, ESAC again reviewed in January. They had an additional change that was substantive. So because of that, we had to withdraw the rules from the for consideration for adoption at the February commission meeting, make the change, which we brought forth to ESAC at their April meeting, and they recommended. And I'll tell you a little bit more about that in a second, which is why it's now again before you all for the same reasons. So there's really only two changes from what you've seen previously. One is we added an additional rule where we removed the definition of proctor. That's 535.60. The second change was directly as a result of ESAC's conversation, where they requested that the requirement that final exams be closed book be removed, because they felt in light of removing the proctoring requirements, it was going to be challenging, if not impossible, to really enforce a closed book exam requirement. So that's really the only change from what you've seen now, or what you've seen previously versus now. It's that, and then the addition of the removal of the definition in 535.60 of proctor. So your options really before you are, you can recommend these rules for proposal. ESAC has done that for the May commission meeting. You could recommend additional changes that we would go back to ESAC again if you did that, or not recommend them. Certainly up to you, but that's sort of where we are at this point. Happy to answer any questions.
Anybody have any questions for Abby on that? Would entertain a motion.
Supporting a motion to say to recommend approval. Is that what you need?
Yeah, just for proposal.
Recommend proposal.
Right. Motion to recommend proposal as presented.
Second. Motion made and a second. Any other discussion on this item? Okay. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Got the hands up over there. Any opposed, say no. All right, motion passes.
Thank you.
Item number 10, discussion possible action regarding 22 TAC 535.220 professional conduct ethics, including potential conflicts of interest when inspectors refer services to an affiliated company.
All right.
Well, so I could give you a little bit of background. So this is discussion related to a public comment we got back in January. You all actually discussed it, referred it to the SOP subcommittee, who discussed at their March meeting, but really wanted some further feedback from the committee as a whole. So it's back before you for further discussion. This is, if you look in your materials, the comment is from Mr. Gruhl. It has to do with, if you look at this bottom half of the page, the multi-inspector firm issue.
Mm-hmm.
I think there's a couple issues. One, the multi-inspector firm issue, and then referring services to affiliated company.
Right, correct.
So
yeah, and then the agenda item 11 is more generally, which I know we're not there yet, but just for perspective, more generally about advertisements, which is referring to the same comment. So we can get to that in a second. But this was, yes, the second part, as Lee had said.
all right, so for that, I will go ahead and get started with the gentleman made comment.
Okay, so I brought a written copy of my, sorry, my name is Brian Gruhl. Got a written copy of my comments for anybody that wishes to have them. So regarding item 10, I appreciate the opportunity to speak to you. Thank you for your time and service. In every other licensed trade in Texas, pest control, electrical, plumbing, you cannot operate a business without a company license and a responsible license holder. And this applies even in real estate. A brokerage cannot operate without a responsible license holder. And, inspections isn't like that. A single person who may or may not hold a license with the commission can open an inspection firm and employ licensed inspectors. And they really don't have a lot of accountability. They're accountable for the actions of their employees who are license holders, but the commission really is kind of limited in what it can do to a company who doesn't hold a license. And I think that's a lot of the reason we have the problem we have. Multi-inspector firms are becoming a bigger part of the market. Our rules require inspectors to act beyond reproach and without conflicts of interest. Yet firms with 5, 10, 50 plus inspectors that don't have a business license are marketing affiliated services and bypassing 535-220 by simply swapping out the employees. If I wanted to hire a licensed inspector, I could send him out to do an inspection. He'd come back and give me the report. I didn't do the inspection. I'm not subject to the requirement not to sell services. I could go sell handyman services, pool services, yard services, because those aren't licensed and I'm not breaking the rule. There are a bunch of companies that is. One of them has 2 employees whose job is to call the inspection customer 3 days after, make sure they're happy. Okay, you can kind of wave that flag. But then to set up all their utilities, hook them up with a moving service, hook them up with insurance, sell them all the little repair services, refer out all the other repair services that require a license. I'm sorry, that's biased. It's broken. And, I think the fix is simple. Inspection companies should be required to hold a license. That gives TREIC an enforcement arm to carry out its consumer protection mission. And there should have to be a responsible license holder for that inspection company. Some may say this is overregulation. I disagree. One of our charges in the real estate profession, especially as inspectors, is consumer protection. And to maintain our position as a trusted resource within the real estate space, we have to operate in an unbiased and, we have to be beyond reproach. And if agents, brokers, and consumers think that I'm going to sell you based on, if it's a car dealership service consultation, it's going to devalue the profession of inspectors. So our license fees are really low in this space. They're $30 every other year for a professional real estate inspector. By comparison, my TDA pest control license, it's $300 a year to be a business, and it's $125 for me as a CA who's a responsible applicator. If I hire a technician, they're $75 every year, not $15 a year. And I think that we could, even $425 a year for me as a single inspector, okay, whatever, it's cost of doing business. I'm sorry, that's not going to stop me from operating an inspection business. And I think that it would provide funding so that TREIC can properly staff and possibly open the door to other things. But anyway, that's my comments. I think we need to license inspection firms, or we're going to see people continue to make end runs around the rules. And technically, they can do that.
So I'll start with that one. For those who've been around for a while, at one point we actually did license companies. We had to have a corporate inspection license that lasted all of this amount of time.
Yeah.
To the point that I actually got my corporate license right in time for them to say, don't need it anymore. The downside, and I understand where you're coming from, because I think that can be an issue. I think part of it kind of gets weeded out on its own, because eventually the agents that work with those inspectors, they see that happening, and they're gonna end up not referring that person anymore. It's similar. There's a lot of us know a particular security service company, and they offer referral fees for referring out, and they are relentless on those clients after the sale. And I think that has actually hurt that company over time, because I, and along with a lot of other license holders, will never refer such a company, because they just don't want our clients subject to that kind of sales pitch and beatdown. I think some of that takes care of itself. But even if you license the inspection company, people are going to find a way around I think they're gonna find a loophole. There's always gonna be a little loophole in everything. I personally wouldn't have a problem licensing companies. I don't think it fixes that problem. That's just kind of my two thoughts.
So can I weigh in here as well?
Yeah, go ahead. Can you guys turn that up a little bit? Go ahead.
Yeah,
Cole.
so air conditioning is not a company license. It is an individual license. Anyone can open an air conditioning company. You have to have a licensed individual at every location where you conduct business. And so, from that model perspective, you have now they have registered technicians, but if you did that in the inspection industry, it is a good model. You just have to have a licensed person, and that person is responsible for all work conducted from that location. So it doesn't matter if you hire 1, 10, 15 subcontractors, still your responsibility to make sure it was done right per code. I'm pretty sure electrical is the same way, that it's not the company. Even when I had the underground fire line certification, the company has to register and be a registered company, but they still have to have a competent person who's responsible. So all of those models lend themselves to multi-employee firm applications, kind of like where the multi-inspector firm are going. So really it's about the responsible person, and then everybody under them doesn't have to be fully licensed. Inspectors are all fully licensed. So,
and I understand where you're going. I think kind of his point is not the people actually doing the license. It's after the fact. You have the inspection the license inspectors doing the inspection. Then after the fact, they give the report, is done by ABC inspection company. It has, 20 different inspectors. The inspector does a good job. Everything's great. They give it back to their company. Their company has a division that goes through and starts calling them and trying to sell ancillary services. Hey, based on this report, do you need a handyman? Do you need a plumber? And starts,
yeah. And from that perspective, it's a little close on conflict of interest for me.
Yeah.
But from the licensing perspective, I like being able to have one license per company and everybody else is an apprentice style. But as far as finding something wrong and then giving it to somebody to fix, that's close on a conflict. But then when you apply it to other industries, say if I was an air conditioning guy and I saw that the electrical service wasn't going to be enough to handle a new unit put in a commercial building, I'm going to have to refer them to somebody or tell them to get an electrician on site.
Right, because in our rules, it says if we do an inspection, we can't do any repairs or any work on said property. That the inspection was done within the first 12 months after that. So that this is companies finding a loophole around that little.
Inspector.
Right, it's the inspector. Yeah.
Brian Gruhl again. So the companies that are doing this are predominantly 50 plus and 100 plus inspectors. These are big companies. This is not me and 2 other people that work with me that are taking advantage of this. And I just think that it's important that we maintain the integrity of the profession and not have it turn into a sales inspection. They're frequently sending out, there's 2 products in the market that will take the inspector's report and attempt to assign prices to everything in it. Mm-hmm. That's become
that's a huge liability.
Yeah. And so to your point that this would self-correct, I think if it was you or me or another 1 or 2 person inspection firm, it probably would self-correct, but it's clearly not self-correcting when I can think of 3 companies that do this that are in all the major markets in Houston.
I think a big part of it's going to be educating. Educating people, the agents, consumers, stuff like that these kind of things happen. Because I think that we see it from our side, but they may not see it. So I think part of it is the responsibility lies on us to educate those around us.
We received a call last week from a homeowner. It was at College Station. The house was 3 years old, and they had a pre-listing inspection, and they said that their inspector told them that the roof needed to be replaced. It's like, well, that's kind of odd after 3 years, but we'll go out and take a look anyway. You have hail damage and stuff. Anyway, turns out there was minor issues with the roof, exposed nail heads. One of the hip shingles was cracked because where they folded over at the fascia board. Okay, that was it. Well, it turns out that the inspector that performed that prior inspection has equity ownership in a roofing company.
Mhm.
Wow.
And recommended the roof need to be replaced.
Of course.
So that's really the issue here. If you look at our rules, 535E6, the one that prohibits inspectors from doing any type of repairs, maintenance, etc. The issue is that we regulate the inspectors when they perform the inspection. We want them to be fair. We want them to be impartial. We want them to do it with integrity without having any conflict of interest. And that's the thing, when your interest, you have a self-interest, or you're likely to benefit from making a finding of a deficiency, that's where the issue lies. Are you going to say, this is fine? Or are you going to be swayed by that interest and saying there's a deficiency here and let me tell you how to fix it? So it's that extra step that we're concerned about in this particular rule, because otherwise inspectors can, do their inspection and they can refer services. The thing is there an interest, self-interest? Why are they doing this? Something that might impact the objectiveness of their opinion.
So, Brian, you having a pest control business are a perfect example of how this rule is really very hard to enforce.
Yeah.
Because you go in to do a home inspection and a termite inspection on the same visit. Home inspection says you can't make any repairs. Your pest control license, you're expected to make the repairs.
Or you can solicit.
Yeah, or you can solicit to
and
someone else. Yeah, it's expected that I have a termite license. We don't do treatment. And very frequently they're like, well, why not? Everybody else does. Why don't you do it? It's like, I don't have time, but I have the license to do it. I just don't want to. It's not one of my business.
And it's a good affirmation that you're giving your client an unbiased opinion on what you're actually seeing.
But I wish they would all recognize that was it. Right. So, but granted, I have some relationships with some pest control companies that I can refer. But, where is the line from Brian's doing a home inspection and a termite inspection, finds the termites, and he wants to treat those, but did he find them under his home inspection license, under his pest control license? Is he violating any rules?
Brian Burrell again. So the answer is he found it under his pest control license because the statute in that space, which we won't get too far into, requires that the inspection or diagnosis or treatment or even recommending treatment requires you to be licensed for pest control. So a home inspector might say this is insect damage, but they can't say this is termite damage unless they hold a license.
Right.
TREIC's position has been that if you hold a license, that allows you to sell those services even if you find them on a home inspection. That's what has been taught. So electrician who does a home inspection could offer to sell a panel upgrade. I agree.
I don't believe that's
why not? Why not?
You can't
So
do
I
anything
don't
on a house that you've done an inspection on for 12 months.
Okay, so we can do it with the termite license, but we can't do it with an electrical or an HVAC or a.
Culture, and we're not doing
Termite's
termite
not
at
part
the
of TREIC.
inspector.
Right,
Yeah,
but the
Electric's part of TREIC. Termite is not.
Well, so I don't.
But you see
I
where
didn't
we're
want to
going
spend
with
too
this.
much time over there. Normally, I'm working for the buyer, and in a sales inspection, the treatment is the responsibility of the seller. And normally, they're not going to hire the inspector that told them there's a problem. It used to be that the seller paid for the termite inspection, so something's changed there. I normally stay out of that. There are companies that come in doing a home inspection and say, we'll come back and give you a free pest control treatment so that they can sell the pest control services to the buyer.
Mm-hmm.
I don't do that either. The other thing that I wanted to bring up is that the companies that are violating this rule have sophisticated sales approach. They are not they're not calling the inspector and going, hey, how much is it to inspect my house? What are you doing? No, you're calling a call center. You're calling salespeople who sit at a cubicle all day and sell inspections who do not hold a license. And the company is taking the money. So the client has the relationship with the company, not with they don't know who the inspector is a lot of times until the day of the inspection. I think these are all reasons why we need to regulate the activity of participants in the real estate space.
Rhonda?
Can we pull that back up for just a second? Because I have a couple of comments there. My first comment is that in the state of Texas, it's my understanding that if you are a licensed trade, that you are, so HVAC, electrical, plumbing, right, that you can go out and troubleshoot a problem and recommend repairs, whether it's in the context of a real estate transaction or just a service call, right? I mean, I have a problem with my air conditioner. I'm going to call an AC guy. He's going to come out. He's going to inspect the system, troubleshoot it, and then give me a cost estimate for repair. And I don't think there's anything wrong with it. And I think in the real estate transaction realm, that is still applicable. Now, with regard to inspections, so long as the inspection company keeps the inspection separate from the repair company, even if it is a close arm's length relationship, while I may not agree with it, I think that they have complied with the rule. So long as, if we look at number 7 there on the screen, it says inspectors shall not disclose inspection results or client information without prior approval from the client. So ABC Inspection Company is not at liberty to share the inspection results with ABC Repair Company, even if they are owned by the same owner, in my interpretation of that. So while I personally wouldn't do the inspection and then maybe farm it out to my also owned handyman service, I think I probably could, so long as ABC Handyman Service does not have, hasn't been given a copy of the inspection report or the information contained there. That's just my thoughts. Thanks.
I think the problem you run into there is that the permission of the client, and what ends up happening is the permission of the client is granted within the inspection agreement, and it's in the little fine detail that nobody actually reads. I know because people should, but they don't. But they have given permission many times in that inspection agreement to give that report to A, B, or C or whatever, and not without even realizing it. That I think that actually already happens. I've seen that in multiple times.
Absolutely. So is that our responsibility to ensure that the consumer reads their contract? I mean, we have clearly stated as this Real Estate Commission and the Inspector Committee to say that we have no governance over a contractual agreement between the consumer and a business.
So I think
Tony, maybe you want to weigh in on that.
Well, I think we all see that there's some potential issues here with mixing of services and whatnot. I think, to me, education is the primary way to address some of that, helping to the consumers, real estate agents, whatever the case may be, to say, hey, by the way, this company does this, just, and helping them understand what those relationships may be. Aside from that, we all realize there's a lot of potential issues, but we're not actually coming up with potential solutions. I think the corporate license is one potential solution, but I think there's a lot of loopholes around that too. And getting a corporate license that's going to be a legislative change, if I'm not mistaken. Anyway, that's just going to be way down the road.
So what about a solution to require disclosure if they're referred to a company who's also owned or a member or investor?
Written disclosure is
Do what?
It's included.
Or I'm just saying, I think it's in the.
I think that actually is in there, that there's a disclosure part of the settlement services area that's there.
Brian, we'll look at. So we have forms that are used on the sales agent and broker side for disclosure of relationships, and that might be a happy compromise where if you're going to refer services where you receive compensation, that the client must sign a TREC promulgated form. I've seen them in, when I look at the listing notes, I've seen them, there's one for home warranty and there's another one. I've seen a couple services, and I'm sorry, I don't spend a lot of time on that side of the fence. I just know they're there. And that might be a model that would work in this case.
Well, and that's an interesting, thought, because I think it was never thought to be needed on the inspection side because it is specifically mentioned in there that we can't refer those services, but obviously there's loopholes around that. I know what form you're talking about, the relationship form on the agent broker side. It's a possibility. Somebody's feverishly looking.
Yeah, no, that's correct. With regards to settlement services, it does say that if it's not settlement services, then they just need to disclose it.
Right.
The section 6, they can't work on it. That has to do with a conflict of interest for the individual inspector. That's
It doesn't stop the company from.
It doesn't stop. But if the inspector is going to disclose the client's information, they need to have the permission of the client. So there's some built-in safeguards to try to protect the consumer and to prevent this conflict of interest from the inspector who we license. Anything else, this is just how the rules are written at this time. Anything else that you guys think should be done, that would require, like you said, legislative or rule changes.
Okay, so I have additional inspectors that work for me. The way I read this right now, an inspector shall not do. So if one of my guys does the inspection, can I go do the repairs?
Yes.
Mm-hmm. So do we need to change this to inspector or inspection company?
Well, I don't know about the inspection company, because again, we don't license the inspection
We don't
company.
define it.
So we only have jurisdiction over the individual inspector and their conduct. So whatever they do, we can regulate that.
So how do we fix it?
Yeah, I mean, that is a good point.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm seeing a whole new line of business opening up here.
I mean,
And I don't want to.
He has a DBA filed.
Sorry, Cole, go ahead.
I was going to say I don't want to put too much out here, but again, what comes to mind is the fire line certification I had when I was doing underground work. The licensee was the person who went and took the test and had to be employed by the company, but the company also had to register. And if I remember right, company registration was $800 or $900, and to hold that registration, they had to have a licensee or competent person, or however it was termed, on staff. So that's kind of another way to tie it together, where you're not actually regulating the company, but you're requiring the company to register to have those people work there. That doesn't really work for the single inspector companies, more of a multi-inspector company solution.
There's got to be a way this could be worded where it would prevent anybody within a company.
So when inspection companies were registered, was that a legislative change and then another legislative change to
That was a
revive it?
license.
They were licensed.
It was actually a corporate license.
Okay, so, but it was legislated in and then right back out.
Correct.
Yeah.
Understanding Sunset Review 2 times ago recommended it was superfluous because inspectors are already, licensed, regulated, so they recommended the removal of that license.
Yeah, this is back in.
Yeah, because if it's a single inspection company, I can see where doesn't necessarily work. You have to register both yourself and the company. It's kind of doubling up on a registration.
Yeah, I have to do that with my lead inspector license.
The only thing we have right now with regards to the name of the company is that we want the inspectors to register the name under their DBA.
Right.
Because if they do an inspection under ABC Company and the client looks up ABC Company, they're not going to find this inspector. So there has to be a way to tie him in so that then they can refer to, the inspector that did the inspection.
Right.
Brian Rule. I wanted to throw another piece of information out there. There's a company called Porch. I'm going to name names. They have bought up.
We can't talk about it.
Oh, okay. Sorry. Well, there's a company. We won't name the name then. Sorry. I didn't get that memo. But there's a company that has bought several software companies, and they own one of the platforms that's used for scheduling. Their business model is to get the prospective buyers' information to sell them a range of services.
Mm-hmm.
That's where the idea came from that went to these real estate inspection firms. And, you know, and again, the way that they get around this is they just bury it in the contract. It's already a 7 or 8 page contract. No, you know, the number of people who call me and ask me questions about my agreement is extraordinarily small. I actually congratulate them. I'm like, well, congratulations, you read what you're going to sign. Thank you. What can I help you with? But I think the promulgated form is the simplest non-legislative solution that clearly discloses that there is a relationship between the prospective inspector and whomever.
The disclosure relationship form?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, it's a big issue, and I know what you're talking about. I think for me, the primary piece of this is going to be education, because I run into that a lot where people ask, "Well, don't you offer this?" No, here's why I don't offer this, so that you know that when you get an inspection from me, it is completely unbiased. I have no other interest in this beyond that inspection. That's the whole purpose of the way these rules are set up, is so the inspector is a completely unbiased person. You know, for the consumer, specifically for consumer protection. Are people going to find loopholes and ways around that? And have they? Absolutely. Don't deny that. It's how do we fix it? That's where we're into an issue. So I think we all see that there's some potential there. Let's put this on a future agenda item, because I think it's a good discussion to have. But let's take the next 3 months and kind of see if we can possibly come up with other alternatives or solutions for that. I don't want to spend all day on this one thing. It's obvious we all have, you know, thoughts going through here, and we all realize the potential, but nobody's really has a really good idea on how to fix it. So if everybody's okay with that, I kind of say, let's keep that on the agenda, have that on the next time. Let's spend the next 3 months kind of see if we can't come up with some possible ways to really address it. Did you have some?
Yeah. As multi-inspector myself, I would love a company number.
Yeah.
So, you know, what number do I put on my trucks?
Right.
Yeah.
With a
multi-inspector
firm.
Yeah. Right now, it's my number.
Right.
Okay. On every truck. Yeah.
Yeah.
Whereas I have a, you know, Texas Pest Control license for my company that goes on every truck, but it's not my CA license.
Right.
So, you know, what number goes on advertising? If I'm advertising for 100,
that's our next agenda item.
Oh, but if it ties in, okay, well,
yeah, I know. I just,
trying to. I thought they just got back together.
Start, you know, shaking when we go into next agenda item. We haven't called.
Okay, so yes, company license needs to happen. So whatever has to do.
All right. So let's put that on the agenda for our future agenda item.
Okay.
And with that, we'll move on to item number 11, discussion possible action regarding 22 DAC 535-221 advertisements. So again, same type of thing, advertisements with multi-inspector firms. I mean, it's just.
Okay, so if they're a multi-inspector firm and they have 100 inspectors that they're advertising for, I expect to see 100 license numbers on here.
Which I don't think is really feasible or reasonable, but I understand.
And I want to see 100 license numbers on the pen that you put out. Okay, so you see where I'm going with this, though. Yes, it's an extreme example, but that's, if you're advertising for all of your inspectors, either you have a company number or you have all of your license numbers on there, or the owner of the company like me puts their license number on there.
Well, as the owner, you are the responsible inspector.
No, you're not.
That way.
I was going to say that with air conditioning, you only have to have one license on your advertisement, and that's the person in charge of that location.
Where's that coming
Hang on,
from?
hang on, hang on.
Shannon Gaywood, another scenario that is very legit is the owner of the company is not a licensed inspector.
That was the other
Yeah.
one.
So how does the inspector, she or he puts out
Puts out this advertisement without any license number on it, and there's nothing that can be done.
And that's kind of where I'm at too, is we get advertisements done by inspection companies, but there's no license number. Correct me if I'm wrong, Tony, but even if it's a company that their ownership is not licensed inspectors, they still have to put at least some responsible party's license number on all advertisements for inspection services.
So the way we get the complaints is we don't get very many advertising complaints for inspectors. When we get them on the back end after there's been an inspection. So typically the ones I see do have some license holder information on them. I haven't seen the ones you're talking about. They may be out there, but we don't audit advertising companies or websites, so we don't see them. But the definition does say that an advertisement is a communication created or caused to be created by a license holder for the purpose of inducing or intended to induce a member of the public to use the services of the inspector. So, I mean, that's a good question. If there is someone putting out an advertisement, then you have to own up to it as a license holder. Say, this is me putting it out.
Let's say the license holder is not the one putting out the advertisement, then it gets around that rule.
They could. I mean, at that point, it may be unlicensed activity. If someone is, attempting to engage in unlicensed activity. But the problem is there's, it's complicated. It's a gray area. Most of the websites do include like a list of inspectors about us. And then they have all these inspectors sometimes that's what we have a problem with, that they don't put all their inspectors or all their license numbers, et cetera. But a lot of them do.
Right, but what you're saying is in the rule, it says an inspector that solicits advertisements. If it's a company where the owner of the company is not an inspector, he's not an inspector soliciting that advertisement, so he's not subject to that rule.
Or is it a
But if
licensed
you're-
activity?
But if you're advertising a
Licensed
home
activity.
inspection.
It does, the rule also requires websites containing advertising by one or more inspectors that they include the license number of each person whose name or assumed business name appears on the website. So they have to, if there's some employees, and which typically they do, they say these are the people that work for us, they're required to have that. And so on the back end, if there's an issue with typically what happens is the complainant is the buyer and says, the inspector did this, and in their advertising, they said they were going to do this. So that's how it comes into play, tied into, was there a false promise? Was there a false misleading? Typically, that's the kind of issue we look at.
Well, for me, if I see an advertisement, I get a lot of advertisements between the two emails for inspection services. If I see an advertisement about inspection services, I expect to see some license number on there. However, the way you just read that rule, there's a workaround to where if I am ABC Inspection Company, I own the company, I'm not a licensed inspector, but I have 10 inspectors that work under me, I'm creating the advertisement. Then I don't have to have that license number. I'm advertising inspection services, and yeah, all our people are licensed, whatnot, but because I am not the license holder that is creating that advertisement to solicit inspection services, that rule doesn't apply. And it's not an unlicensed activity, it's a workaround.
We'd have to look at the specific.
I get a lot of advertisements that have no license number on. That drives me nuts. I usually send them an email directly saying, hey, you gotta have a
And
license
there's
number.
these national companies
Yep.
that put out advertising for the national company, and then they have their local. So, I mean, I see what you're saying.
Yeah, but the national companies very rarely have an actual license.
But
number.
they don't, unless some of them do have like disclaimers for different states. So they might have the little something for our state.
Yeah, or they'll say, use national company A, and, our local person for you is Billy Bob with license number.
And you go to that area and look at his website.
And I feel like we could probably talk about this for another 2 hours.
Yes.
I mean, is this something that can go to one of the subcommittees to update? Because what it sounds like is that we've got a lot of these rules written more geared towards single inspector firms, or multi-inspector firms are becoming more normal. I mean, like, even if it's only 1, 2, or 3 of us, maybe we need to refer this to one of the subcommittees or something to actually revise the verbiage so that everything is covered, because otherwise I think we'll sit here and talk about this for.
Probably the SOP committee can take a look at that issue and see what they come up with.
Good luck, guys.
Right, well, so I wanted to point out that particular advertisement. Sorry.
No, I said no
Go.
pressure.
That particular advertisement was offering inspections outside of a real estate transaction, and and so they're commingling. We're licensed, we have licensed people, but we also have unlicensed people who can come do this non-real estate transaction a year after you bought your house. And I don't think the consumer is sophisticated enough to know that that was a non-licensed inspector. And if they put their house up for sale and a year later, their real estate agent or their broker says, have you had any inspections done? Oh yeah, when I bought the house, company A did this, and then they came back and they did a second inspection a year later, because they're required to say, have you had any inspections done? And I believe the rule says by people who are employed as inspectors.
But the 11-month warranty inspection isn't a real estate transaction. You don't have to be licensed.
Right.
So that's the issue with that. If, we do get a complaint, we would be looking to see if the advertising was false and misleading. So there is a rule that could address.
So we're saying, if somebody says my house is not on the market, that as long as the person who does the inspection does not hold a TREIC license, it is not something that TREIC can regulate.
It's not subject to a sales transaction.
Okay.
Buy or sell.
Because my assumption is I treat every inspection like it is a real estate, prospective buyer or seller is really vague. Anyone who owns property is a prospective seller. Anyone anyone can become a prospective buyer. So I interpret that to mean any inspection I do of property is subject to regulation.
And I think that's a good safeguard. I know that if I do a lot of warranty inspections, I do them the same I put them on the same form. I do the same exact thing because I like consistency. I don't want somebody coming back on the backside 2 years after that. They sell the house and they're like, whoa, and it looks completely different. To me, it's a protection. I don't have to do that. Certainly not by license because it's a warranty inspection. But as a business owner, I do that just because I think it's better for the client.
And on that vein, the only inspections that I do not do on TREIC are, because I held my code certifications, I get asked to do HUD compliance inspections, and I explicitly disclaim that this is not a TREIC inspection, and it is a code final inspection. And when I do phase inspections, I treat them the same way. I treat them as code inspections and use the required disclaimers.
Same if I do apartments, stuff like that. I don't use a TREIC form. It's more than 4 units.
Yeah, like when they do the HUD inspection, I do those as well because you have to be an R5 inspector. But the mortgage company is our client in that situation.
Not always.
Yeah, because when you're doing those FHA HUD compliance for the FHA VA insurance, we always invoice the mortgage companies. I don't know who the buyer is. So that's something too.
That's
because if you're in
on the transaction.
If you're doing invoicing the client now, are you doing inspection for the client?
All right. So before we get going down a rabbit hole, because I can see where this could happen very quickly, but if you guys can start take a gander at everything, because I know you have nothing better to do on SOP subcommittee, so we'll tack that onto your plate. But I think it's something that needs to be looked at. Okay. Item number 12, discussion possible action regarding delivery methods for the Inspector Legal and Ethics SOP review course. Number one, I definitely want to reiterate Jennifer Wheeler's comments earlier about the amount of effort that has gone into that legal SOP course. It is a tedious process. And Jennifer Gruby is here as well, and under her direction and all that, it makes it so much more seamless than it really could be, because that is a lot of information that
Judy.
That's right.
Yeah, her and the rest of TREIC staff really put into that, the subject matter experts. The three of us here, and it's a lot of information. It's funny because the three of us, between just the three of us, we can get little slightly different views and aspects of things. And Jennifer Gruby always does a really good job of, we'll put some information in, she'll sense that, well, how about if I just take this little sentence out? Just maybe, is it okay? And she tries to do it really nicely to say, we might just want to delete it. If it's okay, we just want to delete that one little section.
Hint, hint, hint.
Yes. Because sometimes it's really hard because we see things as subject matter experts that information we want to put in, but we also sometimes have to take a step back and go realize this is going to 4,400 other people, and with the goal of being consistent across the state. I definitely want to say thank you everybody for the time and effort that goes into that, because it is quite a process. I would reiterate for all committee members to please really go through that manual. There's always going to be some grammatical and little dinky things and stuff like that, but others, yeah. And that's going to happen, and those are going to slip through. So just, it is what it is. We can fix as much as we can.
Are we going to get a copy of it before?
You should have a
email.
Yeah.
And we sent it as a supplement to the email.
Last week.
In the email last week.
Yeah, and then there was another one sent, I think within the last 24 hours, there was another one sent as well. So check your email.
If you don't have it, I'll forward it to you.
But really go through that, look at the content, because we basically have, it doesn't go for final approval until the next, not the May commission meeting.
No,
but
it's May.
is it? Okay. But really look through that if there's anything that needs to be done. But there's always going to be some things that slip through the cracks, grammatical and stuff like that. I was teaching the class last month and saw one in the old class, and it's like, oh, it's really annoying. But it is what it is. But go through there. Let's make sure that we get that as close to right as possible. I think over the years, this is the third version, I think, of this course that we're putting out. It's getting better and really fine-tuned each time. So I think it's a lot easier this time than it was 4 years ago, but still quite a process. The issue that I had, or the question I had, not necessarily the issue, but the question I had on this particular item was the delivery method for the legal SOP course. So I think when the course is taken, whether it's via Zoom or in person, it's 8 hours. It's full on, encourages discussion, encourages interaction and whatnot. I have some concerns when the option to do the legal SOP course is strictly online at your own pace, log into a website, go in and whatnot. It's been kind of an ongoing pet peeve of mine for some time, because there are some companies that you go in, I can log in and have my certificate within 20 to 30 minutes on an 8-hour course. And that's a problem if it's an 8-hour course. And not only in my response for that particular company, and it's not to pick on one company, but the response I get, well, that information. So of course but I shouldn't even have the option. There should be no way for me to log in. If defensivedriving.com can force me to sit on that stupid thing for X amount of minutes and seconds per section, the technology's been there for over 20 years. I know it's possible. Tells you how long it's been since I've done defensive driving. But
nice try to save.
You like that? But the ability, there should not be an ability for somebody to log in and get that certificate on an 8-hour course without spending a substantial amount of time.
Yeah, the big CE provider that is no longer the case. They have the seat timer, for lack of a better term.
Okay.
Yeah, but you can turn it on and let it go while you go do something else.
Yes, you can
fix that. Yeah, that's same.
But if you to prevent someone from dozing off and screwing with their email or whatever in the back of a classroom, it's the same thing.
Yep.
But if you don't have the online option, then what about your guys
out in the outskirts?
Yeah, out in the outskirts. That
I don't think you can get rid of it. I don't think you can get rid of it.
Yeah, I don't think you can.
I can get to a classroom once every 2 years. That's no excuse.
Online.
And I mean, I'm about as rural and outskirt as some of these inspectors can get. And I don't have a problem getting to a classroom once every 2 years.
I mean, it is a license, it's your livelihood. But,
Yeah.
right.
Brian Corll. So I think I have an interesting perspective here as someone who taught CE classes to both inspectors and realtors in person and in Zoom. And I've taken the legal and ethics course twice in person and once, the last time I couldn't find it in person. So I took it through distance education. Can't name names, but honestly, I got more out of the distance education version than I'd gotten out of the other 2 times, because the other 2 times it was boring. Okay. And I sat in the back of the room and I'm getting my seat time and I'm getting my email and surfing the web and occasionally, engaging with the instructor. So, I think we need to meet learners where they are. And while some people can make time to come do things like this meeting or to spend a day in class, one of the things that was really powerful for me with the distance education is being able to do 45 minutes of it tonight, an hour and a half of it tomorrow, 2 hours the next day. And I was able to split that course up and actually focus on it and not be in there dozing off because I stayed out late too last night. So at any rate, I think just don't discount the distance education. As for the company that allows you to circumvent the seat time, they're out of compliance. I think the education department and enforcement would back me up on that. But I know when I looked at doing distance education courses, you had to have a way to track seat time and you had to have a way to challenge identity. So, and challenge identity was the part that kept me from doing it. I couldn't find a way to randomly ping people and go, prove to me you are who you are.
Yeah, no, they had their challenge identity part. You want to say something?
Yeah, I just wanted to say in general, there's a lot of talk right now in the education industry about subject matter mastery and competency-based learning, which those types of models are kind of like what you're talking about. They require the engagement. There may not be a seat timer, but there are at least, like for us anyway, time studies that are required. So the provider has to come to us and show evidence of X number of students, and it took the average student this amount of time to substantiate how long they spend in the course. Again, the interactive exercises and engagement activities support the length of time that the student is required to be in the course. There's always going to be, the one who does the least, right? The provider who does the least just to get to the bare minimum. But we have, over the last several years, we've increased our standards for distance education and added those additional elements and components. And if they're not there, then that is a problem because it's not being offered in the manner in which it was approved, which I know, we've had this conversation in the past and people are hesitant to file complaints, especially if they end up in a situation where they want to try to get through the course in 20 minutes, Yeah. So there's really a lot, I think, to take into consideration when you think about making any kind of recommendation.
Well, at the very least, I know that TREIC doesn't have the ability to go audit everybody all the time and do all that. So TREIC is a complaint-driven entity, and that is part of the issue. But if nothing else, educating people that these 20-minute online classes really hurt everybody and hurt the industry. As much as they may be convenient, I'm kind of with you. It's once every 2 years. It's 8 hours to keep up with my license and my livelihood for what I enjoy doing the most is not a big amount of time.
But I think also to another point, and this is just for conversation.
Sure,
I'm just throwing this out there. You can also have a classroom course that is really dull and you're really unengaged in.
Oh, you've sat in my course. Okay.
Well, I wasn't going to say, but
that's all right.
But no, just for perspective and for consideration. And I don't know, Groovy, sorry to catch you off guard, but Groovy is the one who primarily looks at these courses. And I think the level of professionalism with the distance education courses has been raised significantly over the years. But again, that doesn't mean that there won't be one or two that get by. Yeah, or you find a way.
There's that minimum,
Mhm.
Jennifer was saying, there's the minimum standard.
Yeah.
For our approval, so.
Right, well, so to the classroom courses, I know of at least 2 providers that do what I refer to as turbo mode, where they want people to sit for 4 hours of time and not use the bathroom so they can get through the course. And it's supposed to be an all-day course, and oh no, we're out of there 5.5 hours because we didn't take any breaks. We didn't take lunch. And I'm like, this is a really horrible way to do adult education, but that's really common. Like, I've never taken an all-day course in person and spent the required 8 hours there and taken breaks every 45 minutes like you should with adults. And it's one of the reasons that, okay, distance education, maybe I don't get the networking and the camaraderie, but you know what? If I need to use the bathroom, I can pause the course, go be an adult, come back, pick the course up. It's not a big deal. I'm not sitting there for 4 hours going,
I think in the end, it kind of comes down to the student. I mean, the student, if they're not getting the education that they're supposed to be getting, they need to be filing a complaint. Because that ball can't get rolling until that complaint is started. So, and I didn't expect, when this got put on the agenda, I didn't expect us to come with big revelations or whatnot. It's mostly to have the conversation and to get it out there that we've got to get, if people are not getting the proper education, especially on this course, which the whole point of this course is to be consistent across the state. Everybody's getting the same up-to-date information. If that's not happening, then we need to hold the educators accountable.
Well, and you can, if you want to send it to subcommittee.
We can send it to subcommittee, just at least so you can have the discussion. Like I said, I don't anticipate a whole lot of big revelations as far as, how to fix it. I think the biggest part of it's going to be education on that. But it's been an ongoing thing. It's much less than it used to be, but it's still there. But again, you're always going to find somebody that finds that bare bones minimum way of getting those things around. And I have seen those courses too, where people try to bum rush through, and the students aren't going to complain a lot of times because they want to get out as quickly as possible type of thing. But you're not getting the education you're supposed to be getting.
Because we brought this up in the review because we're adding stuff in and we're all talking, while we're Zoom meeting, and we kept going back to the people that need to hear this are the ones that are doing the distance education where they're running it in the background. It's like the people that need to hear this are the ones that aren't hearing this. And so that's where this came up, to where we need to try to amend it to where everybody has to sit through it and hear it. So that, I know I'm going to do it. Lee's going to do it. Shane's going to do it. We know we're going to do it. It's the other 4,000 inspectors that we need to make sure are doing it too.
Fair enough. Yeah.
Shannon Gatewood. So I just sat through the legal ethic SOP a couple weeks ago because I was part of the work. I'm like, I'm going to be at that group to see what notes I can take. So I did just a quick informal poll right before break. 0 people in that class thought it should be online only. That there needs to be a live component to it because it's too important of a class to not be able to ask questions back and forth and all that stuff. Take that for what you will. I'd also be interested to see if there's a correlation between disciplinary action and delivery method that they took their legal ethos SOP over the previous however many
We looked at
times.
that. There's been no change from 2018, 2019 to now.
Gotcha. Interesting.
The disciplines and the complaint filing remain the same.
Yeah. Because I'm just
assuming like pre-COVID, where people were doing it in person and stuff.
Yeah.
We're disciplining 24 to 30% of the complaints being
Right.
received. It's the same percentage as of last year as well.
Except for the guy that didn't do anything for 12 years.
Like the 7-6, that one's always on there. Use the wrong report form. Well, did that guy been doing this online only for the last 4 times? He didn't even realize that there was a 7 that we moved from the.
That's why we leave that in the next version, even though that thing's 3 years old at this point.
Yeah.
We still leave it. You have to use the 7.6 because obviously it's still an issue. Yeah. Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Item number 13, discussion possible action regarding recommendations related to SOPs.
This is just your standing item. In case there's anything anyone wants to discuss.
I think you guys are still in review, don't have anything up for proposal yet, right?
No, we're going to finish every section and then put everything together and review it.
Fair enough.
Okay.
So mechanicals next.
Okay. I'm not trying to put any timelines on it, but do you have a, in theory, time frame before when to possibly expect proposal?
Well, I suggested that we meet and just knock everything out in one more meeting.
Okay.
But I haven't heard back.
Okay. So ideally,
Instead of meeting like every couple of months, going over one section, we can knock everything out in, less than a day.
I think that would be logical if people can do that. If that's the case, if the other committee members are available and able to do that, then in theory, for our July meeting, we might.
When's our next meeting?
So your next meeting will,
It's
we're gonna send out some
Yeah, I did-
information in May.
okay. I didn't think that.
Just to schedule, but you discussed, having it around the inspector meeting so that, maybe it's a time period where you stay a little later.
Right after this or something.
Okay.
I didn't think it came out. That's why I
Yeah,
said,
it's not scheduled yet, but it will be soon.
Fair enough. All right, item 14, request for future meeting. Sorry, it's a flight catching up. Request for future meeting agenda items. We had a couple that we had on there already. Does anybody have any other item that they would like to see on a future agenda?
Where would looking at the preamble for the 7-6 come in?
The SOP subcommittee can look at that, but we could also put that on the next agenda item, to look at as a whole committee too. Absolutely.
Yeah, because that needs some looking at.
Okay.
We'll just leave it at that for now.
Ooh,
Yeah, that's never come up.
okay. But that'd be something SOP certainly could look at, but we can put that on a future agenda item too. Just know that if we do that, and it's going to make everybody happy, if that preamble changes, it does change the form. So.
But if SOP
I know
is already
everybody
got
looks forward to
something,
it.
this is the time to do it.
Yeah, if you're going to do it, at least do it in one shot. And like I said, that the current SOPs in form are 3 years, I think it was February 2022 when that went into effect. So they are 3 years old. So, and keep in mind that even if we propose it in July and whatnot, we're talking, it's still a process.
Yeah.
We still have a ways to go. So it's certainly not out of the realm of possibility, but if there are issues with the preamble that we need to look at, sure, let's take a look at it. Absolutely. Anybody else?
It's getting a little outdated.
Yep. I see construction started. All right, discussion possible action regarding future meeting dates. Currently, for our next meeting, which typically is in July, we have a date of July 14th at 10 a.m. Start without everybody okay with July 14th. Are there any potential conflicts with July 14th?
Not at this point.
Good. Seeing Cole, Rhonda, they seem to be okay with that. Nobody's flailing their arms. Okay. All right, so we'll set that one for July 14th. And then prospectively, but not set in stone, tentatively, Monday, October 20th would be the fall meeting.
Yep, that's
Not your last meeting.
Yes, it is. That's the Hawaiian shirt meeting.
Oh, I heard we were gonna change
Stop,
the way
No, we're just gonna chain him.
This is being recorded. Stop. All right, so as it stands right now, this may change obviously later on, but does anybody have any current conflicts with October 20th? No? All right.
October 20th.
October 20th, Monday, October 20th. Okay.
Okay, Ronlyn has her hand up.
Yeah, I may have a conflict. I'm supposed to start testimony in a trial that week, but so I'm just putting it out there. Nothing may become of it.
Okay. All right.
So we can keep it on there for now.
Okay. Tentatively, we'll leave it there. You may know more by our July meeting anyway, so we can kind of relook at that when that comes up too. So, okay. But thanks for letting us know just in case. So if that's the case, as we move forward, let's just keep in mind some flexible dates around that time just in case so that we can make accommodations.
Yeah, but the Monday before October 20th is Columbus Day, so that's probably not going to work. But
I think we've actually met on Columbus Day. Might be wrong.
We have,
I think,
President
yeah.
United States.
So I think we have, yeah. That sounds.
And again, the traffic is much better coming in.
I like that one
It is
personally.
tough, with kids, because kids do have that day off.
Fair enough. All right. With that, we will adjourn the meeting at 11:49 a.m. Thank you, everyone, for attending.
Right.
Thanks, guys.